Leah's life began in the most unusual and tragic of circumstances. As a baby, she had been stolen from her parents, the wealthy and loving Mr. and Mrs. Eleonora. They had longed for a child, and when Leah was born, their joy was immeasurable. But that joy was cut short when one dark and stormy night, their newborn daughter vanished without a trace. The Eleonoras, devastated, launched a relentless search, never giving up hope that their little girl would one day return to them. Meanwhile, Leah was left on the doorstep of an adoption center, a small bundle with no identification aside from the star-shaped birthmark on her shoulder. Growing up, she never knew her true origins. The adoption center became her home, and she watched as other children came and went, getting adopted by loving families, while she remained behind. School was no escape from the loneliness. Kids can be cruel, and Leah became an easy target. "Orphan," they would sneer. "No one wanted you." The taunts and bullying were relentless. The pain of not having parents and being treated as an outsider wore her down. But there was a strength inside Leah that the bullies couldn't touch. She found comfort in books and in her own imagination, dreaming of a day when she would find a family who would love her. That day seemed to come when Leah was 14. A couple, Mr. and Mrs. Arden, adopted her, and for the first time, Leah felt a glimmer of hope. But the Ardens were not what they seemed. Once a wealthy family, they had recently fallen into financial ruin, and Leah's arrival was not out of love, but convenience. She was expected to be the family's unpaid servant, tending to the household chores while their real daughters, Mia and Clara, lived a life of comfort. Mia and Clara treated Leah as if she were invisible, unless they wanted something. They mocked her, just as the kids at school had done, making her do their bidding while they lounged in luxury. The chores were endless, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, doing laundry, but Leah did them all without complaint. She had learned long ago that life was about survival, and she was determined to survive, no matter what. As the years passed, Leah's spirit remained unbroken. She worked part-time jobs in secret, saving what little money she could. She didn't know what she was saving for, but something inside her told her that one day she would need it. Then, everything changed one fateful afternoon when Mrs. Eleonora came to visit the Ardens. She was an old family friend, and despite the years that had passed, she still hadn't given up hope of finding her daughter. When she arrived at the Arden house, she noticed a young woman cleaning the floors, her hair tied up in a messy bun. Leah was busy scrubbing, unaware of the visitor's presence. Mrs. Eleonora glanced at Leah, and her heart skipped a beat. She noticed a faint birthmark on the girl's shoulder, a small star. Her mind raced. Could it be? After all these years? But she needed to be sure. Approaching Leah cautiously, she asked, "Excuse me, dear, may I see your shoulder for a moment?" Startled, Leah stood up and showed her the mark, confused as to why a stranger would be interested in it. Mrs. Eleonora's eyes filled with tears. It was the exact birthmark her daughter had been born with. She had to know the truth. "Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" Mrs. Eleonora asked, her voice shaking with hope. Leah, unsure of what was happening, agreed. It wasn't long before the test results confirmed it. Leah was her lost daughter. The reunion was overwhelming. Mr. and Mrs. Eleonora embraced Leah, their hearts full of joy and relief. Leah, who had never known what it felt like to be truly loved, finally found herself in the arms of her real parents. But just as Leah's life seemed to be taking a turn for the better, a darker, more sinister plot unfolded behind the scenes. Her uncle and aunties, who had long had their eyes on the Eleonora fortune, were furious that Leah had returned. For years, they had been secretly draining the family's wealth, using it to build a private army and fund illegal activities. Now that Leah was back, they knew their scheme was at risk of being exposed. Desperate to protect their ill-gotten gains, Leah's relatives plotted to remove her from the picture once and for all. They hired a group of dangerous goons to abduct her, planning to make her disappear forever. One evening, while Leah was out running errands, a black van pulled up beside her. Before she could react, she was grabbed and thrown into the vehicle, blindfolded and terrified. Hours later, Leah found herself in a cold, damp warehouse, surrounded by thugs. They had taken her phone and tied her hands, leaving her to wonder if she would ever see her parents again. It seemed like all hope was lost, until she met Eric. Eric was one of the goons hired to keep watch over her, but he wasn't like the others. Leah noticed that he was quieter, more thoughtful, and seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. What she didn't know was that Eric was an undercover cop, infiltrating the syndicate to gather evidence on their crimes. When he saw how scared and vulnerable Leah was, he couldn't just stand by. One night, when the other goons were asleep, Eric approached Leah, whispering, "I'm not who you think I am. I'm undercover with the police. We need to get out of here, now." Leah, though wary, decided to trust him. They slipped out of the warehouse under the cover of darkness, dodging guards and security cameras. Eric took her to a safe house, where they regrouped. There, Eric explained the full extent of her uncle and auntie's crimes. They had been running a massive criminal syndicate for years, using her parents' wealth to fund illegal activities, and Leah's return had jeopardized everything. With Eric's help, Leah gathered the evidence they needed to expose the syndicate. The next few days were a whirlwind of danger and secrecy. They worked together, uncovering secret bank accounts, shady business deals, and the private army her relatives had built. Leah, determined to save her parents and clear her name, pushed forward with courage and resilience. Finally, the time came to strike. In a massive police raid, the syndicate was dismantled, and Leah's uncle and aunties were arrested. Their private army fell apart, and all their illegal activities were brought to light. Her relatives had betrayed her parents in the worst way, but thanks to Leah and Eric's bravery, justice was served. With the syndicate destroyed and her family safe, Leah's life was finally her own. Her parents, proud of the strong, determined woman she had become, supported her in starting her own business. Leah built a company from the ground up, using the resilience she had gained from years of hardship to guide her decisions. But Leah's story didn't end there. Despite all the cruelty and betrayal she had faced, she chose forgiveness. She even offered jobs to Mia and Clara, the daughters of the Ardens who had once mistreated her. They too had learned from their mistakes and became some of Leah's most loyal employees. Through everything, her abduction, her betrayal, and the hardships of her past, Leah rose above it all. She became a symbol of strength, hope, and the power of forgiveness. Her story, one of tragedy and triumph, proved that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can shine. As the story draws to a close, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more exciting and inspiring stories like Leah's. Your support means everything.